Can you tell me the story about Dayglo?
Dayglo essentially is the story of a mother-daughter relationship. The daughter, who is 17, hasn't seen her mum for 5 years. They had a big split when she was a teenager, when she was 12. And the mum has called out the blue and asked the daughter, Stella, to come and visit her. Stella doesn't quite know why and is a bit apprehensive about meeting up again. She travels to Brighton to meet her mum and finds out that her mum has had an operation for breast cancer and that she's been quite ill. Stella has to decide whether to stay with her mum, look after her, and she is helped in that decision by meeting a guy called Noel, who befriends Stella and helps her look into the options that Stella's mum has as far as treatment for cancer or further treatment for cancer. The spine of the story is basically a scientific belief that if you can match people's genes to particular drugs, then you can give them a more personalised care and you can treat their ailments better. So using breast cancer as a kind of exploration, we're looking at the role of pharmacogenetics and what that can offer people in terms of better personalised medical care. Stella is 17, she's a bit of a hipster girl. She's been living in London with her nan. She's been away from her mum for 5 years. She left her mum after a big row when she was 12. She was home educated by her mum in Brighton, but when she moved to London to be with her nan, she went to a normal school and had a kind of regular education. But she's quite funky, she's a bit of a hipster, she's got her own ideas about fashion and music and is a very independent girl, but quite sort of mature for her years really. Her mum Stella was a rock and roll kind of punk singer in the late 70s and was quite famous for being outrageous, singing outrageous songs, banned from the telly, that sort of thing. Evelyn, she then went on and had Stella when she was quite old really, in her 30s. So having a child was like a new project for her, and she tried to incorporate being a mum with still living a rock and roll lifestyle and still enjoying that music, and found that quite difficult, I think. Noel is about 19. He works in Brighton in a sort of fried chicken shop, so he sells fast food to people, and he's a bit of a jester, a bit of a wisecracker. He really likes sort of talking to people who come into the shop, and he looks for sort of the best in people and wants to befriend Stella and kind of make her feel a bit more comfortable about going to confront her mum. And there's a character, Bryan, who is the nurse who's been looking after Evelyn while she's been ill with breast cancer. Bryan is a very kind of professional guy. He really enjoys his nursing work and he likes to take care of people and give them as much information as he can. But he's also a fun guy. He likes to go out and party hard. And when he was training as a nurse, he really liked Evelyn's music and liked that whole kind of retro punk scene, and was a real fan of Evelyn's kind of anti-establishment sort of slant.
So why did you choose to set the play in Brighton?
I love the seaside. I think Brighton is quite a sort of alternative place where people go and can be quite anti-establishment in a way. It's got a vibe that's quite artistic and creative, but also the character of Evelyn, although not based on a particular singer. There was one singer from the early 80s called Polystyrene who was in a band called X-Ray Specs, who sadly died of breast cancer last year. From interviews I've read with her, she really liked Brighton Pavilion and liked Brighton as a place to be. So those two kind of aspects came together and I thought, it's got to be set in Brighton.
Which character do you find that you identify with most?
That's difficult. I identify with Evelyn. She's probably more my age, and I like her kind of feistiness and the fact that she's probably still 17 or 18 inside despite being in her 40s, and she's a mum. I'm a mum to two teenage girls, so I can identify with that. But I also identify quite strongly with Stella, because I've known people who've had cancer and who've died of cancer, and I can understand the desire to want to do as much as you can to try and help somebody, but also perhaps not having the wherewithal or the tools or quite knowing what to do or what to say in those circumstances.
What character do you hope your audience will identify with?
I think the audience will identify with all of them, hopefully, but with each journey that the character's on, there's going to be something there that's going to pertain to whoever's watching it. I guess if you're a young person and you're watching this play, you may feel more involved with the journey of Stella or Noel, perhaps. But I think each character, will have a bit of everybody in them.
Evelyn is one of the central characters in the play, and she was a punk singer when she was younger. Was punk music something you were involved in?
I come from Liverpool, and Liverpool's a very, very musical place. And when I was growing up, people were making music constantly. If you're thinking about the birth of punk being 75, 76, 77, I was quite young then, but I certainly grabbed onto the coattails of what the punk movement was. And the sort of new wave sound that came through that in the early 80s was something I really loved and identified with. And I listened to a lot of punk music and new wave music when I was that age, yes.
What was so special about punk?
I think it's difficult for young people nowadays to appreciate just how shocking something like the punk movement was at the time. Today we're kind of very used to Lady Gaga in her meat dress, or people with lots of piercings and kind of anti-establishment attitude. I think the time that punk was happening and it came into the mainstream, people were really shocked that young people would want to protest in the way they did, perhaps dress the way they did, want to pierce their ears with safety pins and stuff like that. Or at the time, 1977 was the Queen's Silver Jubilee, and for young people to actually kind of deface the Union flag or put a pin through the Queen's nose was a very kind of shocking thing to be seen. And I think it was important because it was young people protesting about the state of the nation. Perhaps they felt that they had no hope insofar as a future, getting a job. Sort of unemployment was very high. We'd had a lot of strikes and a lot of political strife in the 70s. So it was coming through that, and it was a protest movement, but it was also very, very creative, and it challenged a lot of stereotypes and a lot of musical stereotypes and fashion stereotypes, and it was just one big kick up the arse of the establishment, really. And I think you don't, although that happens, in kind of sporadic pockets here and there, as one movement in Britain, I think the British found it very difficult to deal with.
At the beginning of the play, there's a metaphor used between Evelyn holding a vinyl and Stella using her iPod. Can you tell us a little more about that?
That relates to the fact that today young people or anyone can download music at the touch of a button. They can get as many tracks as they want in an evening and pay for it online. And it's a kind of a disposable commodity in a way. And we don't listen to music in the same way that we did a few decades ago, when if you wanted a particular track or a particular single, you may have to save a bit of cash and actually go out to a shop and buy it. And have the vinyl record in your hand. And that, I think, made it quite special. And also the artwork that was on the sleeves of the records, the fact that some of these vinyl records were perhaps coloured vinyl or had picture discs. They were lovely things to hold, icons to kind of have on your shelf, much more so than a kind of list of names on your iPod.
One of the themes that you introduce in the play is around choice and whether having so much choice is a good or bad thing. Can you tell us why this theme is important?
I don't think anyone would disagree necessarily that choice is a bad thing. I think we all strive for as much choice as possible in all sorts of areas, be it through healthcare or education or where to have your children. Choice and knowledge is power, as they say, and more choices means that perhaps you have a better chance of getting what you want. But sometimes I think we can just have too many choices, and then it can be quite confusing. And if you're in a vulnerable position, if you're a patient, or if you're, to take the example of perhaps being pregnant and knowing that you want certain things to happen to you in labour, for example, but there are just too many choices, or you don't have the right to exercise the choice that you want, then it can be quite a struggle. So on the one hand, people are telling you, well, you can have A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and on the other hand, you might not be confident enough to say, this is what I want, or you might not know which choice is best for you, and perhaps not know where to go with all those choices.
So what things do you think are important to the audience?
I think the fact that science is kind of racing ahead with lots of new findings is very exciting, and that's really encouraging. And with medicine and pharmacology, and the fact that you can be treated with different sort of pills or treatments is great. You also need to balance that with what's available, what perhaps your particular PCT can afford, or what's available to you in certain clinics, or what's going to be right for you as far as side effects and stuff like that. So you really need to have all this knowledge under your belt, because there are just going to be more and more choices, I think, in the future, and you're going to be perhaps faced with difficult choices, and that needs to be navigated. And I think young people today need to be kind of choice literate, really.
How do you address the challenge of writing about a situation that you may have little knowledge about?
That's one of the great things about writing fiction, because what you're essentially doing is playing let's pretend. If there's a character or a situation that I haven't any direct experience about, what I will do is read up and do a lot of research, do as much reading as I can around the topic or the person, and then literally make it up. And you kind of play. I will act as if, I don't know perhaps what it's like to have breast cancer, but I can act as if I've been in that situation, and maybe draw on things like, well, it's a very challenging thing, what other challenges have I faced, and draw on that kind of authenticity or that truth of other challenges I faced, and write those into the character.